So my presentation today will discuss the methodology and some preliminary findings of a nationwide residential water use study that's currently underway here in New Zealand. The aim of this research is to increase awareness of water use across the country and to create a national benchmark, something which is currently unavailable due to a lack of data in the residential space. Freshwater is often described as New Zealand's most valuable natural asset and is considered fundamental to the economy. It is a vital necessity for our primary industry, agriculture, and for hydropower generation, which is important as New Zealand generates around half of its electricity demand from hydro. Likewise, water is vital to the tourism industry here in New Zealand and is highly regarded for recreation by tourists and locals alike. But as well as being important for the economy, freshwater holds significant cultural value here in New Zealand. Freshwater availability in New Zealand is often considered to be abundant due to low population density and higher than average rainfall received. This figure shows New Zealand as a nation to have plentiful water availability per capita compared with other countries across the world. In fact, the total freshwater available per person in New Zealand is reported to be higher than 180 other countries across the world. Per capita, freshwater availability in New Zealand ranked 4th amongst members of the OECD, behind Canada, Iceland and Norway. It is important to note that whilst New Zealand has a lot of fresh water, we also use a lot relative to other countries. It is estimated that water use in New Zealand equates to 2 to 3 times more water per capita than most other OECD countries. In part, this is due to our hydroelectricity generation. This figure shows New Zealand again relative to the world for freshwater withdrawals, and you can see that per capita we're withdrawing over 1,000 metres cubed per person per year. Water abstraction data for OECD countries is presented here. This is the OECD average, and this is New Zealand. The only reported country to use more water per capita is the United States of America. So what does this look like at the regional level here in New Zealand? Well, it means that in some regions, fresh water has begun to reach the limits of availability. Highlighted here are the Otago and Canterbury regions of the South Island. The dark blue indicates where water is closest to its limits of availability. As I mentioned earlier, agriculture is the primary industry of New Zealand, and this comes through when we look at how fresh water is allocated across the main sectors. Irrigation accounts for 78% of consented water takes, and stock drinking water a further 3%. Industry accounts for 11% and drinking water just 8%. It is important to note that hydroelectricity has been excluded from this graph, as for the most part this is non-consumptive as the water is returned to source. Focusing in on drinking water, whilst the volume of water that is consented for domestic abstractions is well understood, the actual consumption of domestic water in New Zealand households is not. The average estimate of actual consumption of these consented takes is 65%, but this can vary significantly between regions. New Zealand has over 67 water service providers, and each supplies, charges, and reports on their own residential water use, which can lead to huge variation when looking at available data. At a national scale, it is not clear how residential water use is used, and there is no national benchmark at present around the average use for different sized homes. New Zealand does not have universal water metering. In fact, only around half of residential homes have a water meter, and around 1/3 of these homes are located in Auckland. It is likely that there will be a difference between the water use of metered properties in New Zealand's most densely populated city and water use in small rural centres. At present, there is very limited data for non-metered districts. This research project aims to quantify residential water use across the country to create a national benchmark and to increase awareness of residential water use. To do this, we have used a 3-tiered method. The first stage of the project was to randomly survey homeowners across the country to gain an understanding of what water-using appliances are in the home, but also how homeowners perceive their own water use. Phase 2 involved the installation of meters that were capable of taking a daily consumptive reading over a 12-month monitoring period. And Phase 3 involved the installation of high-resolution meters capable of measuring every 10 seconds during the 12-month monitoring period. Data from these high-resolution meters, in conjunction with the water end-use software TraceWizard, will be used to disaggregate a household's water use and break water use events down by appliance. Here is an example of some trace wizard analysis from a previous water end use study on the Capita coast of New Zealand. As you can see, it allows identification in the data of an appliance's fingerprint and allows us to make conclusions about how in the home water is being used. This project aims to provide valuable information on residential water use, not only in the larger cities, but also in rural centres. So far, 45% of survey respondents are from rural properties, 41% provincial, 10% metro, and 4% from urban properties. Of the participants to respond to our survey, the majority are homeowners, with a small percentage of the sample renting. In terms of the life stages of participants, retirees make up a large proportion of the sample to date, followed by others, couples for example, and families. In our survey, we wanted to know how homeowners perceive their own water use, so we asked them to estimate how much water they think their household uses a day, and whether they would categorise this as low, medium or high. As you can see, the majority of people classified themselves as a medium user of water, but within this category, water use estimates ranged from 10 litres to over 1,500 litres per person per day, highlighting variation in how people perceive their own water use. Data collection for this study is currently still ongoing, so I'll present some results from a previous BRANZ water end use study in the Auckland region to discuss and demonstrate the methodology. This particular project uses the same method and will build on the findings of the 2008 Auckland water use study. As you will remember, phase 2 of the methodology was the installation of meters capable of taking a daily water consumption reading. Here you can see a snapshot of properties' water use from the 11th of June to the 10th of July 2008. Some notable spikes in water use are present, particularly this one on the 21st of July, but there are also smaller water use spikes observed. What we can do with this level of information is compare seasons' peak water use days between districts and properties and identify how external events affect water use within the home, water restrictions for example. This level of data does not, however, allow us to say why the water use spiked on the 21st of June. Those homes installed with a phase 3 meter collect data every 10 seconds, which in conjunction with TraceWizard will allow us to take a more detailed look at the appliances in the home. Here you can see the same dataset for the Auckland home, only this time TraceWizard software has been used to disaggregate the different end uses. You can now see that irrigation spiked on the 21st of July and is responsible for the increased water use. Again, on the 14th of June, irrigation was responsible for the spike, and again on the 28th. What these days all have in common is that they are Saturdays. This detailed level of data allows behavioural trends in household water use to be identified across the monitoring period. Ultimately, what this level of data allows us to do is to quantify at the household level what proportion of water is being used for different appliances. For example, of the 54 homes sampled in Auckland, 27% of total water use was the shower, 23% was found to be the washing machine. Only 12% of water used in these homes was found to be for outdoor water use, although it was found that this varied significantly based on the season, and this is something that we're going to elaborate on in this study. BRANZ has conducted 2 similar water end use studies in the Capita Coast and Auckland areas. This project builds on this research by taking a national approach and looks to create a national benchmark for residential water use and to raise awareness of water use across the country. It is the aim that this information can be used to identify within the home areas that could benefit from efficiency initiatives. It is also the aim that this information can be used for forecasting and modelling going into the future.